Welcome to the Anti-Woke Podcast.
Anti-woke, 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 yeah. Anti-woke, 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 yeah. Let's do this. The Anti-Woke Podcast.
Walmart has announced that they're getting rid of some of their DEI stuff. Reading from AI. They announced they will shutter their Center for Racial Equity, which was launched in the wake of George Floyd's death, and will stop using terms like DEI and Latinx in official communications. Walmart will also restrict certain queer products from third-party sellers on its website. And I believe they've also pulled out of HRC, the Human Rights Campaign thing, where every big corporation gets a number on how much they're turning the kids gay, and then every corporation competes with the other ones to see how high they can get that number. And, the only way to stop trying to turn the kids gay is to just no longer participate in that number from HRC. And Walmart is the world's largest private employer, so that's pretty big, 2.1 million employees. The second largest is, can you guess? Do you want to pause? Amazon, 1.5 million, and they have not pulled out of HRC yet. So we're going to keep an eye on that. The Slate Money podcast this week had an entire special episode devoted to how DEI is not doing great in America today. I mean, there's not much new. The only new thing is Walmart, and Trump is coming. And so I think he can do an executive order that says all the federal government stop discriminating on the basis of race. Discriminating against white people, obviously. And the federal government is probably the world's largest employer, period. So that would be big. Now, the government, I think, is just full of incompetent black women. You can't fire them. So, it's not going to change that. I mean, stopping hiring them isn't going to change anything. I think during the pandemic, you always hear these numbers about how unemployment is so low and it's so wonderful. And all of that is because the government has hired a ton of frickin' people since the pandemic. If you take that away, then America hasn't hired nothing. And that's not even including the fact that illegal immigrants are the other bunch of people that have been hired. If you take away government people who have been hired and illegal immigrants who have been hired, Americans have been fucked in the last 4 years as far as employment. There's always ways to cook the books. Well, so Elon's doing his Doge thing. Maybe that'll fire some people, shake things up. There's something called Schedule F that Trump tried to do at the last second of his first of Trump 1.0 and didn't get it through. And that is a change to allow you to fire federal employees. I'm sure we'll be hearing about Schedule F, in the years to come. But another interesting thing to watch is federal contractors. A lot of work that the federal government does, it's just done by people that they hire, and they super discriminate in their hiring. Or, they make the people they hire also discriminate. Let's put it that way. So I used to have a job as an electrician working at a VA, Veterans Administration hospital. And this hospital was huge. It was built in World War II. One of the hallways was a quarter mile long. And the company I worked for was just a normal, large, well-regarded electrician company. It was all white men. There wasn't a single woman electrician. The people in the office were all women. All the electricians were men. Every single person in the office was a woman. The usual. But we were not directly hired by the federal government. There was some construction company. It was, I guess the general contractor. I don't know what you call it. I mean, these contracts lasted for years. This old hospital never stopped being improved and worked on. But anyways, the general contractor was some construction company, and it was owned by Native Alaskans, Eskimos. And, all the people from the general contractor company were white men. But anyways, somehow if you went up high enough, you got some people that weren't white, and that was how the federal government, required it to be. So they'll probably be changing that. Well, and then also, every big company is sucking at the government's teat. So, Amazon works with the federal government. I don't know if that means that the feds can tell them, all right, Amazon, you can no longer discriminate on the basis of race, period, in anything, even that, maybe the relatively small part of Amazon that works with the federal government means that all of Amazon not only has to stop DEI. A lot of companies are saying they're stopping DEI. They're renaming it. They're renaming it to IDE and shit like that. I guess there's a move to take out the E. It's just going to be DI. Diversity and inclusion, because they don't want to talk about what equitable means. But Amazon, a lot of their money comes from running data centers, stuff that you don't notice as a shopper. And I'm sure they work for the federal government. So anyways, the federal government has its tendrils into everything, which normally you would maybe not like. But if it means that everywhere one of their tendrils goes, they have to, go by merit, by the meritocracy, then that's going to be like, poof, humongous change all across America instantly. And, I don't know what the feds are buying from Walmart, but maybe that's why Walmart just changed. The recent Advisory Opinions podcast was talking about Elon and Doge and whether or not they're going to be able to shrink the size of the federal government. At least according to them, long story short, the answer is no. There's just too much stuff in the way. Every administration is like, we're going to make government more efficient, and then everyone fails every time. So is Elon just an idiot who's put his reputation on the line and is just going to fail spectacularly in the eye of the people? We shall see. But anyone can tell you that. The one thing the podcast mentioned that you don't always hear about is sue and settle. So I think this is how it works. But the federal government has the Department of Justice, which is a bunch of lawyers. And, everyone knows they go after the bad guys, the criminals, or maybe the good guys if it's January 6th. So they're kind of like the TV show Law and Order. But another thing they do is if the federal government gets sued, then they defend the federal government. But they can also just roll over instead of fighting back when the government gets sued. So basically, you find something in the government you don't like, you get a right-wing organization to sue to stop it. It goes to the court, the judge says, okay, halt that thing until we figure stuff out. And then the government says, we're not going to defend that. And then you're just left with that initial decision by the court, the injunction that just stops the thing. And so it's kind of a quick way to stop things that circumvents the normal process. Requires collusion between basically the DOJ and then whatever organization is suing the government. And the famous example that I can think of was under Biden with the asylum seekers. We got laws that say you don't let in illegal immigrants. There's that word illegal in there for a reason. But anyways, the government's got they rounded up a bunch of illegal immigrants, and then some left-wing organization would sue the government and say, you got to let them into the country, because of blah, blah, the asylum laws. And Biden actually just wants to let them in. And so he's just like, okay, DOJ, don't fight. We'll just go with the initial injunction and let them all in. So we'll see if, what kind of sue and settle happens with Trump now and maybe Elon. The thing, I think this is how it goes, is that so you can sue and settle on something huge, like letting in, 1 million illegal immigrants. So you can do things that are giant, individual giant things. But Elon's talking about, he's like, there's 10,000 little tiny government regulations that all need to go. I don't think you can sue and settle for 10,000 little things. You may be able to do a few giant things, but you can't do a ton of little things. So I don't know how it's going to work. Well, the top 5 largest private employers in the world are number 1, Walmart, 2.1 million. Number 2, Amazon, 1.5 million. Number 3, Foxconn from Taiwan, 1 million. That's the company that makes the iPhone. And the employees are actually in China. And then number 4 is Accenture, which is in Ireland, 700,000 employees, and I guess they're a consulting firm. And number 5 is UPS, 500,000. But speaking of Ireland, in a tortured way there, they just had their elections. And Sinn Féin, the political arm of the Irish Republican Army, if you might have heard of it, that party came in first. doesn't exactly matter. But anyways, they are the housing crisis party. And so all three, everyone who voted for the three parties, there's the Irish version of the Republicans and the Irish version of the Democrats, and then there's the Sinn Féin. Anyways, all the voters, whichever way they voted, they all voted about the housing crisis because Ireland has a crazy, terrible housing crisis. I don't know. And they do coalition governments there. So like their version of the Republicans and the Democrats are going to get together and control everything. And then Sinn Féin will be left out in the cold. I think that's what happened at the last elections. None of that really matters. I looked up Sinn Féin. They're pro-immigration also. So basically there's this thing that's going on throughout the entire Western world, which is that immigration equals housing crisis equals immigration. But to understand that, you need to get the woke lying scientists to tell you that. And they're a bunch of woke liars. And so everyone is keeping mum on this weird housing crisis. I don't know where it's coming from. And someday the voters are going to realize what is causing it. And there's just going to be this enormous change everywhere, basically all at once. Maybe, Trump is, watch Trump not tell anyone about that because, the rich get richer over immigration. And even Trump isn't going to tell the public that's how it works because he doesn't want the public rising up here either. Anyways, just the same old thing is happening in Ireland. People in the media are talking about the Twitter alternative Blue Sky a lot this week. After the election, a bunch of left-wing progressive types left Twitter and moved over to Blue Sky, which is a Twitter clone. And so a lot of, so-called mainstream journalists have moved over there. Therefore, you're getting a lot of mainstream journalist takes on it. And Blue Sky is putting a priority on moderation, which basically means censorship. So they're trying to be like the way Twitter used to be, where you censored all the right-wingers and the left-wing people could use it as a way to control the world and turn the kids gay and all the other stuff they want to do. And so now for America, at least, there's three big enough to talk about text-based social media companies, which is Twitter, X, Threads, which is Instagram, Facebook's version of Twitter, and then now there's this thing called Blue Sky. And Slate Money was talking about it, according to, people who think that if you want your kids to grow up in a nice country, then you're obviously a racist Nazi, left-wing journalists. Then for them, Twitter is the place where Nazis go. Threads is where normal people from Instagram go. And so on Threads, people are talking about should you take your kids to the grocery store when you go shopping? I don't know what that question means. It's something that I think women will understand. So maybe Threads is for women or moms or something. But I guess what it's not for is knock down, drag out political discussions about Nazis. And then Blue Sky is political discussions, but it's left-wing people. I don't know, I heard someone was like, I went and created an account at Blue Sky and everyone there is just constantly talking about how Twitter is full of Nazis. Like, you go on Blue Sky and you talk about Twitter. Maybe. But maybe they're getting big enough that they can move past that. And I will say, what's kind of crazy to me is, I don't know, I watched even like a nonpartisan guy talking about it on YouTube. And he's like, okay, I left a comment on Twitter, on Threads, and on Blue Sky, like the same comment. And he's some super famous YouTuber who's not political, and he was getting thousands of replies and retweets or whatever on all three of them. So like all three of them have enough people that this guy could get thousands of replies and comments on his post. Basically, Blue Sky is not a ghost town, and in fact, for a lot of people, maybe they're getting more comments on their posts than they do on Twitter, which is kind of the criteria for whether or not a social media company is going to make it. I mean, I'm on Twitter. No one ever replies to anything I say, so therefore I don't say anything. Therefore, I don't use Twitter, really. And if that happens, if everyone is like that, then the thing goes away. And then the other thing this guy was talking about is, how do these companies make money? Well, maybe like advertising. So anyways, currently Blue Sky does not have advertising, right? when a social media company starts up, you be real nice to the people to get a bunch of users, and then you try and milk them for money. So Blue Sky is in the phase of being nice. But the thing he said that was a big deal to him was if he was doing like a charity event to raise money for something. And so he wanted, so he put a link to his fundraiser. And Twitter right now, it downranks anything where you provide a link. Basically, Twitter does not want you to leave Twitter. So if your post is anything about, hey, leave Twitter and go give me some money, Twitter is like, doesn't show it to anyone. It just doesn't work for doing that. And I guess Threads is also kind of like that. Whereas Blue Sky currently, whatever you post about, if you post your political take, they'll show that to everyone. If you post a link to a fundraiser, they'll show that to everyone just as much. And it sounds like, once they get big enough, maybe they will go the same route as Twitter and no longer let you promote your crap. They just want you to promote themselves. Anyways, but they're in that phase right now. And, Twitter was used to do all the evil crap, from as soon, Trump was elected and there was the resistance against Trump in 2016 up until this recent election. That all got started and organized and got its power from Twitter, especially, basically up until Elon bought it. And Twitter was used to rig the 2020 election. So anyways, we'll see if Blue Sky can make the woke journalists all powerful again and rig the next election. The recent Slate Money episode was talking about how Warren Buffett posted a letter talking about how he's going to give away all his money when he dies. And he was going to give his $100 or $200 billion to the Bill Gates Foundation, but they had a falling out. And so he's switched over to giving it to his 3 kids to give away the money. So that's the background. But they said that the rumor is the reason why Warren Buffett stopped giving the money to Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation was because of Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Gates was hanging out with that famous, doing bad stuff to underage girls guy. So that's just a rumor, but that's interesting. And then I guess he was giving $4 billion a year to the Gates Foundation, and the Gates Foundation had to spend that $4 billion. They couldn't sit on it and invest it. A lot of these billionaires are giving a lot of money to a lot of, so-called charities, and the charities just take the money and go buy a bunch of stock and sit on it. That's normally what they do. But this time, Warren Buffett was like, no, you have to spend it. You have to give it to the people, boots on the ground or whatever. But this whole thing may actually be a huge win for anti-wokeness because the Gates Foundation, they give a ton of money for scientific research. The number one thing is probably the NIH, National Institute of Health. Trump just said he's appointing Bhattacharya, who's a famous COVID truther, will be in charge of the NIH. And when I say truther, I mean actually, the truth. The real truth, not sometimes you say truther, it sounds like that's not the truth. Anyways, the NIH may have a better person in charge of it. And that's where a lot of money comes from. The federal government puts a lot of DEI and woke stuff into the requirements before they give you money. So it makes all the scientists into woke liars, partly, the NIH. But the other part is Bill Gates, he's private, so he can really put in a whole bunch of woke lying requirements. And so that's kind of what happened. One of the reasons why you can't trust a word that scientists say anymore is because the Gates Foundation funds a ton of scientists, and it happens, it doesn't even matter if a scientist gets their money from them. Because the Gates Foundation is like, they look at your history. They're like, have you been a woke liar for the last 10 years? If you haven't been a woke liar for the last 10 years, we're not even going to consider giving you money. So then everyone has to be a woke liar all the time, just in case that someday they want to try and get money from the Gates Foundation. Scientists had better be on the record saying that systemic racism is a real thing, even though it isn't, otherwise they won't look at you and possibly funding your project. But so anyways, I guess the Gates Foundation spends $4 billion a year on its own, plus they were spending an extra $4 billion from Warren Buffett. So depending on how woke this thing that Warren Buffett does with his kids is, maybe that's a huge decrease in wokeness. Well, and Slate Money was also talking about this $6.2 million banana that's duct taped to a wall. So this is an art exhibit or something where it's just a banana, like a fresh banana, and it's duct taped to a wall. And Christie's or Sotheby's, whatever anyways, one of the art auction houses auctioned it off, and it got $6.2 million from some Chinese crypto bro or something. I don't know everything about this. And so, why can't you just tape a banana to a wall with some duct tape and get $6 million? Well, anyways, you're not the famous artist who did that, first off. It has it has an artist's name associated with it. And basically all the media outlets are like, this is stupid. Anyone could duct tape a banana to a wall. And what they leave out is that there's something more to the art. It comes with a certificate of authenticity. And basically it says, if you have this piece of paper that is really what you're buying for $6 million, if you have this piece of paper and you duct tape a banana to a wall in a certain way, I don't know if you have to do it at eye level or whatever, then that duct tape banana is the famous piece of art that, everyone's writing articles about and costs $6 million. So basically what you're really buying is this piece of paper. And, I guess think of that what you will. It makes me think. So I went to the San Francisco MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, once, and they have a painting there that is white paint on a white canvas. So it's just white. It's just a white oil painting on a wall. And it's famous. It's worth millions. The artist is some name. I think it was painted maybe in the early 60s. Anyways, the point, why can't you just put some white paint on a white canvas and sell it for millions? Well, the answer is that was the first ever white paint on a white canvas painting. So that's what's special about that one. That's the very first one. And so that I can understand, Never again can you get millions of dollars for doing that, but there's the first one. And, it's kind of like you could, I don't know, if I was a billionaire, I would buy that painting. And I put it on the wall and be like, this is a conversation piece. We can talk about how stupid art is. And also, this thing just went up $10 million a year. I'm making a fortune. Number one with the bullet voting. So bullet voting is when someone votes for Trump and doesn't vote for anyone else on the ballot. Doesn't vote for senators and representatives, for instance, or anything state or local. I think it means you're just shooting the one thing. And I couldn't find exact stats, but it seems like maybe there was a bunch of bullet voting for Trump in the swing states, which maybe means that Trump voters don't like Republicans. Don't confuse Trump voters with Republican voters. Maybe. And when I say there was a lot of bullet voting, I mean maybe 5% in some states, 1 in 20 people. But that is a lot because normally, if you vote Republican at the top of the ticket, you just go R all the way down. I mean, you don't know who these people are. You just go with R's. And, works with Democrats and D's also. Well, if there had been bullet voting for Democrats, which I guess there wasn't. If you voted for Kamala, you were a good little Democrat and you voted for the rest of Democrats down the ticket. I think abortion is going to be politically similar to gay marriage. In Trump versus Harris, the Democrats thought that, women were going to turn out in huge numbers because of abortion, and then they didn't. And I think exit polling said that women just were not that afraid of Trump and what he was going to do with abortion. The Democrats ran lots of advertisements and the media constantly talked about it, trying to get everyone afraid of Trump and abortion, but I guess it didn't work, or didn't work enough to change the election. And I think, one of Harris's main talking points and the talking points of advertisements bought by her was Trump is going to do a national ban on abortion. And then Trump was going around the country constantly saying, I'm not going to do a national ban on abortion. And I've mentioned that the number of abortions is actually up since Roe v. Wade. No one knows exactly why, but it is. And so basically, the way Trump talks, it's like he's going towards pro-choice. I mean, a lot of people think that he's been pro-choice his whole life. He just said he was pro-life to, get elected Trump 1.0. And now he says he's pro-life, but he kind of acts pro-choice. And also just tries to say, I'm not going to do anything. Mostly just dodges it. I'm not going to do nothing. Leave it to the states. And I think the voters have pretty much spoken. If you want to get 51% of the vote, you're going to have to allow some abortion. And I think it's happening quick. It's happening quick because the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And so it reminds me of gay marriage because I think Bush Jr. in 2000, he kind of ran on a wave of anti-gay marriage. Like in 2000, they got gay marriage bans on the ballots in tons of states. And the idea was, well, while you're voting for that, vote for Bush Jr. And then he won. And the Supreme Court got involved in gay marriage too. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically over a period of, 15 years or something, America just changed its mind. I mean, it used to be Democrats didn't want gay marriage either. Anyways, and now Republicans are okay with it, or at least enough of them are okay with it that if you want to get 51% of the vote, you're not going to be trying to undo gay marriage. So there's your little history lesson. Now here's the transgender galaxy brain. So like what happened with gay marriage? America was against it, in both parties. And then eventually America supported gay marriage, both parties. But then the party that really loves gay marriage, the Democrats, they went too far. They got the gay marriage they wanted, and then they tried to turn the kids gay. And that created a backlash. That may be why Trump won. Instead of abortion making Harris win, it may be that transgender shit made Trump win. And so if abortion follows that same trajectory, we're almost at the point now where everyone agrees abortion is okay, which would then mean it's time for the Democrats to go too far again. And so, instead of turning the kids gay, it would be, I don't know if it's abortion at 9 months or abortion after birth, whatever it is they're into. And so we may have another election coming up at some point where abortion helps out the right-wingers when America's like, we don't really like this 9-month stuff. I went and learned more about the Gisele Pelico RAPE case. This is a 69-year-old woman in France, and it turns out her husband had been drugging her and then inviting men to come over and, instead of saying RAPE, I'm going to say assault, but like the real deal assault. And last week I've been like, how do you know you haven't been assaulted by 50 men? And then, okay, you're drugged. How would you not know that you've been drugged? I got all the answers. And so I listened to an episode of a podcast called Seriously, which I think is a popular podcast for women. It seems to be a lot about, murders and RAPE assaults. I'm just spelling it because that's how she spells it. It would not surprise me if, Apple Podcasts or something censors your podcast if you say the word. Normally I would say it. Let's see if I blow up now. Let's see if I can get internet clout, just like Gisele Pelico's husband, Dominique, seemed to want. So this crime, or all the 100 crimes all in one, it ran from 2011 to 2020. It started when this husband and wife, Dominique and Gisele, she went on anti-anxiety meds, and he noticed that it made her look drowsy. And I'll tell you in a bit how this guy is just a insane, serial killer psychopath. But anyways, the way I listen to the podcast is they leave the punchline towards the end. I told you the punchline there. They left that towards the end. They're just like, he noticed that it made her drowsy. And he started experimenting with putting it into her food or into her wine and seeing how drowsy he could make her. I forget the name of the drug, but the podcast does name it. I think it started with an A. And who knows? This is in France, so maybe in French it starts with an A. But so he was experimenting with making her unconscious, and then he started assaulting her when she was unconscious. And she did know that something was up. And she's going to doctor after doctor, getting brain scans and, do I have dementia? Is there a brain tumor? And the doctors could never figure it out. And she would also go to the doctor and be like, down there, it hurts. And, the doctor isn't thinking about what was really happening to her. So anyways, they couldn't help her on that one either. And I guess she just resigned her. She's like, I got some mystery illness that is destroying my life. She stopped driving because, she couldn't be trusted to stay on the road. She stopped doing all sorts of stuff. Anyway, she just thought she had a mystery illness. And the whole time, her husband is acting like the perfect, supportive husband, helping her, with this terrible illness, trying to help her through her illness, when in fact he's drugging her all the time. And it sounds like he was, he noticed this drug made her drowsy, he experimented, found out he could make her unconscious, was assaulting her himself, then maybe went online and found a forum where people who are into that hung out and talked about it. And so this is kind of that thing where like people will do anything for internet clout. I think he became, the star of that forum because he would post videos of the assaults. And then he would meet men, I guess he'd ask men, hey, you want to do it too? And then, anyways, that's where the 50 men come in. They were all part of this forum. And she didn't know any of the men. I guess the only man that she knew was a neighbor. So somehow the neighbor did it too. And so, like I say, this is 2011 to 2020, 50 men, thousands of pictures and videos. You can take 100 pictures all at once. So the number of files doesn't really matter. But maybe they think it's 70 something men. They could only figure out 50 of them, maybe 200 incidents in total. Really, they don't know. This is the cops. And the cops got involved because in 2020, Dominique, the husband, he got caught at a grocery store taking pictures of women's skirts. And the grocery store security guard caught him doing that, grabbed him, asked one of the women if she'd like to press charges. She said yes. The cops got involved. I think they looked on his phone and saw some of the videos and pictures of the wife. And this Seriously podcast, Seriously, tells the whole thing like a story. And they're like, she hears her husband is being charged with taking these pictures up women's skirts. And she can't believe it. And the whole family can't believe it. He's such a great guy. And then a month later, she's called in. She's like, why are the cops calling me in again? And they take her into a questioning room. And they show her a picture. And they're like, it's a picture of a woman asleep on a bed and a man, doing something to her. And they're like, does this look familiar to you? And she's like, why are you showing me this? I don't know who that woman is or who that man is. I don't know anything about this. And the cops are like, look more closely. Does that bed look familiar? Does that bedside table look familiar? So you get the idea. And the cops, Maybe they'd already done this. They had grabbed his computer and he had a folder named abuse, although it was in French. And all the stuff was meticulously labeled with exactly the date and exactly what they did to her and what the guy's name, the name of the guy who came over that day. I don't know if he's like, well, if they catch me, they're going to take all these guys down or what. That's kind of what happened. It kind of sounds like during the trial, they'd be like, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounds. And the husband is like, no, it was real abuse. I was really abusing her and those men were really abusing her. And it was all real deal, maximum criminal abuse. Like maybe he's proud of it or I don't know. And AI says this court case has been going on for a couple months and is going to go on for another month, right now, as of this recording. And he had a system that he made the men follow. They had to park around the corner and then wait an hour and then come in, basically so people wouldn't notice strange people going into the house. And then they had to take off all their clothes and leave those clothes in the kitchen so that they couldn't forget some clothing in the bedroom. Well, anyways, and there was other stuff that he had that he made them agree to. I guess he never charged them any money, so that wasn't the point. And he meticulously cleaned up his wife and the whole house after every incident so that he couldn't get caught. Other than leaving this folder named abuse right there on his computer. And he got friendly with someone else on the internet forum, and they started doing the same thing to that guy's wife. I guess there's 10 known incidents where he abused that woman. And maybe part of the reason that he was putting videos of his wife on this internet forum was to try and find proteges that he could train to do this and he could expand. And then, so he's caught. He's in the system. They got his DNA. Now they're looking at old crimes where this DNA matches. And apparently he was involved in real estate and doesn't sound like he made any money doing it. He lost money. He was a guy who did real estate and lost money doing it. And his DNA showed up there was a 19-year-old woman who was showing off a property, and the guy tried to rape or abuse her, assault her. And it turned out to be his DNA. I think he was not successful in that case. And that was, I forget what, that was like 10 years ago. Maybe in the, anyways, I don't remember the dates, but that was a long time ago. All this stuff happens over like 20 or 30 years. The wife stuff is all the last 10 years. Anyways, and then they find someone who was assaulted and murdered maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and his DNA was there. So he's a murderer also. And that's, only one that we know of. Oh, and he also got caught taking pictures up women's skirts, maybe like right before all this stuff with his wife. And I think whatever. Anyways, the cops had him, and then they just mysteriously, or, paperwork glitch or something, they didn't pursue it. They had him, but they didn't pursue it. So maybe if the cops had pursued that more seriously, the whole thing with his wife could have been stopped. All right. And then they have 3 kids and 7 grandkids. And on the computer, they found pictures of 2 daughters-in-law naked. And apparently he drugged unconscious his daughter. There's no proof that he did anything more than that. But anyways, that's another fact for you. And apparently that daughter wrote a book about how he was the greatest dad when she was growing up. I mean, I don't think the book was about how he's a good guy. I think it's trying to show the juxtaposition of someone who can be such a good father, and you think that's how they are, and then they're just an absolute monster at other times. And in France, with assault trials like this, the victim doesn't have to be made famous or known, but Gisele, the wife, wanted it. She wants everything out in the open. I guess she's going to the trial every day. She's staring the 50 men in the eye when they're being questioned. And there's been marches with thousands of people, maybe thousands of women in France. Maybe this is their Me Too moment. And, there's questions about consent. Well, so that's the crime, but let's get a little anti-woke punditry going here. So the woman on the Serialistly podcast, one thing she says is, there's people who are questioning her, like, how could you not know? And that's what I said last week. And I guess it's like, you're not really against that kind of assault. You're an evil man if you ask that question. And I disagree. Anyways, it's just an obvious question. I mean, now I have my answer. The guy is a crazy monster. It's all true. It's all real. I believe her entirely. I mean, it's all on video. There's no reason not to believe her. But yeah, no, it just makes you go, what the hell happened? Because the mainstream anyways, the media in America, they're just telling you there's a woman, she was drugged, 50 men. That's basically all you hear. That leaves you with just a ton of questions. What are you talking about? Don't question it. What the heck is going on here? And now I know. And this podcast I'm listening to it's like a month old. So I don't know. All these facts have been known. They just don't explain it. I think this is about to blow up in the American media, and then we'll all learn about it. But this whole thing, it makes me think of, they've got a similar assaults, and murders in India situation, and then mass shootings in America. Like, basically, is this French case, is this that we all need to discuss consent? I mean, the answer kind of is, don't be a serial killer assaulter who has a diabolical plan that they implement over decades. I mean, I think I don't know, I don't want to say feminists. I don't know, we'll just say that. This ain't right, but I will just say, feminists. I'm sure someone else will say it like that. They're like, these evil young men, college students who go to a party and get drunk, and then the women are drunk too, and then they have sex, and that's not consent. I don't think a serial killer can teach us anything about that. And kind of a similar thing happened in India. There was a famous case where I think a man and a woman, young man, young woman, called like a cab or a bus. Anyways, like a short bus. There was a short bus with a few men on it, and they got on it and they thought they were taking a ride to wherever they were going. And instead, the men on that bus assaulted her and murdered her. And then all across India, there was marching in the streets, women saying, women should not be, mistreated, which I agree with. But, it was a murder. It's just like, even in India, that was already illegal. It's a tough question. I will admit, maybe the problem that needs to be solved in India and maybe France is, marital rape. Fuck it. I just got to say the word. I can't. I'm sure that lady has to go back and edit her podcast and take that word out. I'm never going to be a huge internet star. But, throughout history and currently in certain countries, a husband cannot rape his wife. In America, that is a crime. In other countries, it's not a crime. They should change their laws. I agree. And then maybe the way you get the laws changed is you go find a serial killer or a murderer, and then you have to use the extreme example to shed the light on the common thing, and get the cops to believe women. It's not believe all women, but in India, it sounds like a lot of cops believe no women ever, and it's similar to mass shootings, where let's take the biggest one ever, for instance, was in Las Vegas, and it was a man, I think, maybe 50, 60 years old. He had a lot of money. There was absolutely no way of stopping this guy. None of the proposed laws about, common sense gun reform were going to stop this guy. He had a diabolical plot that he had, I think for him, it was over a period of months that he concocted it, but you get the idea. Anyways, and people are like, look at that one. We need to take away, every hunter's handgun. And so it's just that thing. You take the extreme example and you use it if it's politically useful to try and get the thing that you really want to get done. It's like, especially back in the day, like Republicans, it's like, oh, the economy's terrible. And Republicans be like, well, the economy's terrible. We got to cut taxes. And then some different year, it'd be like, man, this economy is great. It is going wonderfully. And they'd be like, Republicans are like, this economy is wonderful. We need to cut taxes. It's just people talking their book. So basically, people are just talking their book, trying to help women out around consent in France, even though this case really doesn't have much to do with that. This is not a gray area where you get it. What else? Well, it's a white rapist, so that's good. That makes it okay for the media to talk about it. It's hard to find the statistics on this. I think maybe I heard this from Emily Bazelon on a podcast years ago. But college students, white women getting raped on campus, if they're drunk and it's a gray area about consent, can you consent when you're drunk, stuff like that, then, that'll be a white male student. But if it's just a stranger comes up and holds you down with a knife, that'll usually be a black man who's not a student. And so you can see how the media talks about one of those things and not the other. So this fits that. Well, and I think Gerard Depardieu is on trial for rape right now. If you know that French actor. I need to rewatch Green Card. That's a great movie. Oh God, this is going to sound bad. It would have sounded better if I just put it in the middle and with the rest of the flow, but now as a separate thing, it's not going to sound so good. But Dominique, the husband, said that he started it all, drugging her and assaulting her because she wouldn't do anal, and he wanted to do anal.
Trans kids altering their parts. Hormone blockers planting new starts. Doctors guiding autistic dreams. Isn't it great? Or so it seems.
Let's talk about some transgender shit. There is no transgender shit this week, but that won't stop us from talking about it. The Comedy Cellar podcast on the 27th was talking about it. Well, actually, what happened was, at some previous date, they had been talking about transgender stuff. And then commenters had commented on what they were talking about. And then in this episode I listened to, they were talking about the comments. So let's see. I am talking about them talking about the comments about them talking about it. If that's the bar you need to get over, you don't need to hula. You can always find some transgender shit to talk about. Actually, hula goes under the bar. Whoops, no, limbo. I'm actually talking about going over the bar, so that'd be the Fosbury Flop. First, the Comedy Cellar podcast is affiliated with the Comedy Cellar, which I believe is the most famous comedy club in the world. It's in New York. And they're kind of famous for being pro-free speech, I guess, as you might hope a comedy place would be. You know, like after George Floyd, a lot of comedy places were like, you can't joke about that. But the Comedy Cellar famously let Louis C.K. keep performing after he got Me Too'd for exposing himself to women with their permission. I mean, sort of. I think they thought he was joking. He'd be talking to a female comedian and be like, hey, you mind if I whip it out? And she's like, oh, that's a funny joke. Go for it. And then he would just pull it right out. And normally the Comedy Cellar podcast, they start off with something like live from the Comedy Cellar, and you can listen to us on SiriusXM satellite radio. But this episode, whatever that means exactly, they can't say that anymore. They're like, well, you can find us on SiriusXM on demand, which I think just means on the internet, a podcast on the internet like every other podcast. I guess hosted by SiriusXM or something. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe it's an internet connection to the satellite, but I don't think so. I mentioned all that because last week I was talking about how Megyn Kelly seems to be like a big deal when it comes to anti-woke personalities. And she's on SiriusXM. I mean, she's on YouTube. You know, everyone's on YouTube. I'm on YouTube. So, you know, you're kind of a big deal if you're on SiriusXM, I guess. I was looking at platforms that pay people huge contracts to do podcasts. Spotify pays Joe Rogan $250 million. That's the big one. Amazon has a thing called Wondery that has like $100 million contracts with some people. I think maybe Call Her Daddy and Dax Shepard. I think SiriusXM, you know, they're kind of famous for having Howard Stern. That's not exactly a podcast, or it's basically just a podcast now. I know everyone's raging against the machine. They're alternative media. They're going to tell the truth no matter what happens. And then they get offered a big contract with like mainstream media, and they're like, yeah, I'll take that. I mean, money talks. Well, anyways, this podcast, there's 3 people, 2 guys, a girl. They were talking about should trans women with a penis, be allowed into women's bathrooms? And the woman is the woke one, surprise. And she says, yes, women with penises should always be allowed into women's bathrooms. And one of the guys is like, well, you know, what if women don't feel comfortable? You know, real women don't feel comfortable. We should listen to them and their concerns. And the woman goes, no, their concerns are not legitimate. You know, we should look at the data. The data says it's totally safe. There's nothing bad about women with penises in women's restrooms. It's fine. She also does the classic, you know who else felt uncomfortable? White people. White people who didn't feel comfortable around black people. It's a nice little rhetorical move. Oh, you don't want trans women in women's bathrooms? You're a racist. Or, I'm going to call you a racist. Don't make me do it. Don't make me do it. Don't make me call you a racist. God, everything is like 0 to 60. Or, it seems like that sometimes. It's like, tiny disagreement. You're Hitler. There's a thing called Godwin's Law. AI says, Godwin's Law states that as online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Hitler or Nazis approaches 1. Anyways, I'm sure there's something about getting called racist. But anyways, they start with bathrooms. She's like, there's no evidence that there's any justification for feeling uncomfortable. And to that, I would say, yeah, that's from scientists who lie about stuff if it's political. The answer is we don't know. We don't know if that's safe. I mean, I know she's like, I think she even says at some point, there's never been a problem. That's not true. I think it was called the Wee Spa in Los Angeles, where a man was going into the spa changing room and having a partially erect penis and showing it off to, like, you know, little kid girls in the girls' changing room. There was riots where Antifa was fighting Christians. I don't know, you might remember that from maybe 4 years ago now. And there was a trans woman in prison in the UK who got 2 other prisoners pregnant. I think there might have been a rape in UK prison over that stuff too, but maybe it was, I can't remember. It might have only been consensual. Anyways, she's like, the science says it's fine. So he moves on from bathrooms to changing rooms. And, then the question is not, are you safe, but, do you feel comfortable? Should you be allowed to feel comfortable? I think that was when she then threw out the white people. And then he says, well, what about a changing room that has security? And then, men and women, if a man tries to do something, the security will grab him and throw him out. But everyone, down to the underage girls, everyone gets naked in this changing room. And, there's no reason to feel unsafe because you will be protected by security. I mean, that's not a real thing, but that's an interesting thought experiment. So this is kind of a ladder of escalation, like Ukraine and Russia and America and heading towards the nukes. Because then they go to transgenders in sports. So there you go. You go from bathrooms to changing rooms to sports. Boom! World War III, we're all dead. I just realized this segment I think is going to be long enough to justify me putting in my transgender song. Sweet. You probably already heard it, or I forgot. But anyways, I'm getting ready here to give you a pretty long clip of them talking because it was similar to conversations about transgender stuff that I've had with my woke buddy. I will say, me and my woke buddy have not been having good knockdown, drag out political arguments like we used to. Something to do with the election. I mean, if someone is feeling, terrible, suicidal because Trump won or something, I'm not going to bring it up and needle them. But in fact, we kind of been talking less about politics before the election too. I think it was kind of a conscious decision on my part, and I'm not sure my buddy may have done the same thing, but probably for a month and a half leading up to the election, I still talk to him. I just talked about politics less. There's a lot of emotion there, and I'm not trying to upset anyone. If you want to be upset, listen to my podcast. Bitch. Oh God, that makes me want to go on a tangent about how you call a man a woman when you want to degrade him. Okay, we won't do that. But in arguments past, we've talked about transgender stuff, and my buddy's been like, it's not something I care about. I don't follow that. I don't pay attention to that. It's nothing to me. No big deal. And I'd be like, you're just saying that because you can't defend your position. You can't defend your argument. Which, hey, my woke buddy, I don't think he wouldn't be able to say off the top of his head what his position is, but his position is whatever the mainstream media is telling people that is the right thing. He hasn't had to articulate it, but he agrees with the mainstream media on everything pretty much, and anyways, he does on that too. So his dodge is to say, oh, that's not something I care about. Well, in this clip, you'll hear the woke woman pull that card. Oh, it's not, I don't care about that. And in fact, the guy she's arguing with, he also says, she doesn't care about transgenders in sports. And he's like, he doesn't care about sports. They're kind of in a battle to who cares less about sports and transgenders in sports. Although I think she's like, they should be allowed to play sports. And I really, really, really don't care about it. And he doesn't say, but he's maybe more like, they shouldn't be able to compete against women in sports. And I don't care about it. I really don't care about it. I win this argument because I don't care. She's like, no, I win the argument because I don't care. It's a logical fallacy. I don't think it's a named one. I asked AI if it's a named logical fallacy. It's not. I think you might call it intellectual dishonesty. So let's get a little intellectual honesty in here. So the way this all happened, the timeline was I was listening to the podcast. I heard her say she doesn't care about it. I'm like, hey, that's like my woke buddy. So I'm going to talk about that. And then after some time, I realized in previous podcasts, I have said the same thing. Kind of more about how I don't care about sports. Like, do you not care about the transgender part or do you not care about the sports part? And then I think, whatever, I re-listened to the clip And that's what the guy does. Anyways, it's apparently I'm not special. No one's special. It's not uncommon. So I'm not sure. I mean, this is just a quick theory. There's maybe a couple of reasons you might say how you don't care about something. First one is, like she does it. She's like, I don't care about it, meaning I can't defend my position. So here's how I'm going to win the argument anyways. I'm going to say I don't care. I win, because even though I can't defend my position. And then I think the way maybe I have done it and the way that guy was doing it was like, you have to believe me. You have to trust me. I mean, you can trust me. I don't even care about this stuff. I'm a person who's totally impartial and doesn't care at all. So you can trust what I say as the gospel. I don't know. If I do it again sometime, maybe I'll notice it now. I will say there's been a number of good things that have come from this election. One of which is that it may be it's seeming like it's kind of starting to be the conventional wisdom that transgender stuff helped Trump win. Like the battleground states were just full of ads paid for by Trump PACs they were talking about, I think, transgender sports, right? Kamala is for they, them. Trump is for you was always the tagline. So it's like, oh, you don't care about transgender sports? Well, that's why Hitler is ruling you now. You care about that, don't you? All right. Let's play the clip.
So there is no perfect solution.
Okay.
Is the answer to that question. Now, look, I'm not a big sport. I don't give a shit anyway because I'm not a big sports person.
Right.
But I understand that there are people for whom sports are a big deal. I could give a fuck whether, who wins the gold medal in the swimming competition.
I have to tell you.
I don't give a good goddamn.
I could not agree with you more.
But I understand there's people for whom sports is a big fucking deal. And women that have worked hard and want those scholarships or want that gold medal. And if there's a biological advantage that a trans woman might have in the race, I can certainly understand why she'd be upset.
I agree. I really don't care. I can't tell you how low it is on the list of what I care about. Yes, Noam.
I think it seems to me that the pendulum is swinging very much towards a kind of universal acceptance of the idea that trans women should not be competing against cis women in competitive sports.
Again, I'm just saying that, I just don't, I really don't care. It's very low on my list. I mean, I don't even know if it makes it to my list.
Can I tell you something that people like me, just so you know, the bubble over our heads when people like you speak? The fact that you don't care is really not an argument for anything. It's a way of avoiding an argument. The fact that you say it only happens a little bit,
late term abortion.
What do you think about 9th month abortions, Periel? Well, it doesn't happen that often. Okay, that's not an argument. That's just a dodge. Nobody said it.
Okay.
Okay. It's not serious.
So let's 9-month abortion, is that the question?
No, the question is whatever question was that you said. Well, I don't really care about that. That's not an argument.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I don't know that I'm saying it is an argument, but I think I've said a few times already what I think about that.
What do you think?
I think that I don't know. For kids, I think it's fine. I think everybody should be able to play together. I really do. I think that little kids who are trans should be able to play on
little kids who are trans. It's funny. Like how old? Like little 5-year-old trans kids?
Are you implying that you can't be trans at 5 years old? Well, I think you probably can.
You can.
There's so few of them.
Yeah, the 9-month abortion thing. Everyone always comes back with, it's rare. It's like, there's many things that are rare. It doesn't make them right. I mean, I've heard mainstream media people say that about abortion quite a bit, and politicians. It's just, that's their instant go-to. I mean, I think politicians are trained. Politicians have been trained. If that comes up, here's the answer you give. And then no one ever says, murder is rare. Does that mean murder is okay? Or, pick any rare thing that's obviously not okay. Well, and in fact, the governor of Utah, vetoed a law that was banning trans kids from sports. And that was a few years ago. And then he changed his opinion because he was a Republican governor and the Republicans were going to kick him out, Republican or not. And if he didn't change his mind, so this most recent election, he had to change his mind on that. But anyways, his justification was, it's very rare. But there was a logical fallacy in there and more in the rest of the episode that I didn't put in the clip. But it's called Appeal to Authority, which is basically my argument is correct because some authority says it's correct. But, can you have 5-year-old trans kids? Well, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health says yes, you can. That's the worldwide governing body of transgender stuff. It was recently found out to be cooking their books and being nothing but a bunch of liars when their internal emails were released. So basically, like earlier, the lady is like, yeah, they should be able to use the bathrooms because no trans person has ever hurt a woman. And I don't, it's hard to prove a negative. But, basically like, according to all the scientists who would instantly lose their job if they said anything other than that, they all say they never hurt women. Believe all women, except for in this case, believe no women. And for me, I would go with the science. If science somehow double checks that it's okay for grown men, women to show off their dicks to little girls at the YMCA changing room, then fine. But we have to fix the politicization of science to answer that, before we can answer that question. And probably should just say, no, let's not do that till we confirm that it's okay. I mean, same thing with all the transgender kid stuff. And I guess all the transgender doing stuff to kids, transgenders doing stuff to women. Well, and in fact, I just remembered there is some transgender thing in the news now. Warner Brothers, which owns the rights to Harry Potter, is making a Harry Potter TV show for their streaming service Max. And they released a statement saying that J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, is going to be involved in making this TV show, and it's okay for her to state her beliefs, however she wants. I mean, basically on Twitter. And J.K. Rowling is like super woke, except when it comes to trans women in women's spaces, in which case she's like super based. And there's been multiple attempts to cancel her, but she owns Harry Potter. And I guess it's not in a way that can be taken away from her, so the cancellations have failed. But it's a big change for a movie studio to say, oh, she can say what she wants. Well, okay. I wasn't going to put in this clip because I don't want this podcast overwhelmed with other people talking. But I think, let's get up this furball. Here's the clip of them talking about the stuff that I already summarized.
That I got for saying that, but I can't imagine that anybody could find any fault with my logic.
They did. They said, oh, now we should just be listening to cis
We should be
white
listening to
women.
everybody. And everybody includes a biological woman that might be fearful or hesitant to share an intimate space with a trans woman.
Right, and I'm going to repeat what I said, which is that 99% of the time she has nothing to worry about. Trans women aren't there to do anything, I would say by and large. And I said this before too. Let's look at the evidence. Let's look
what if, okay.
Let's look at how many police reports have been
But maybe they're just uncomfortable. And maybe they just want to be in their own spaces.
You know who else is uncomfortable? White people.
All right.
Black people sharing schools with them. Like, you need to have a good reason to be uncomfortable. There needs to be, actual evidence for some reason why are you in danger? Why are you uncomfortable? You're not in danger, right? But most evidence points to the fact, that you're not in danger. So I'm sorry.
Well, what about a supervised co-ed locker room? You're not in any danger. It's supervised. If any guy tries anything, they're going to...
Well, see, that's different because I think that there's plenty of evidence that most rapes are committed
I'm saying there's no rape. I'm saying it's going to be supervised, and any male that tries anything is going to be halted immediately. But the women would still be uncomfortable sharing intimate spaces with a man looking at them.
I just don't think that's the same thing. I also just want to...
What did she say? Let's get spicy here. She said she's talking about black people and white people, And she's like, you have to have a real reason to feel uncomfortable. There needs to be evidence. So with transgender shit, scientists know, do not study this because you'll come back probably with tons of proof that there are reasons to be uncomfortable about trans women. I mean, we don't know, but anyways, all signs point towards that, because otherwise they would have already come back with the evidence that it's fine. But with white and black people and feeling uncomfortable, just to throw one thing out, black people commit murder at 10 times the rate of white people. And interracial crime statistics are crazy. I believe blacks physically assault Asians 230 times as much as Asians attack blacks. And I can't remember exactly. I think maybe it's like the 2018 Uniform Crime Report from the DOJ or the FBI. The amount that black people rape white people was infinity in comparison to how much white people rape black people. Because it was some number divided by 0. I'm going to kind of make up the numbers because I don't remember, but it's the way they measure it is something like crimes per 100,000 people. And it was like blacks rape whites like 10 out of 100,000 or 100 out of 100,000. And then whites rape blacks was 0 out of 100,000. I mean, I'm sure there is some white on black rape, but like say it's 1 out of 1,000,000, then that would give you 0.1 out of 100,000, which would be rounded off to 0. Anyways, you'll hear that in arguments. People are like, well, you have to provide evidence. And then you provide the evidence and they'll be like, no, I didn't mean that. I just thought that would mean that you'd have to go off and try and gather evidence. And while you were gone, I could just pretend I won the argument. And I mentioned a discussion on the Hang Up and Listen podcast from Slate, where they had a roundtable talking about trans and sports. And one person who wasn't that clued in was like, well, it's not like they're winning. It's not like they're any better at sports, so it's fine. And then another person who was clued in was like, well, we don't want to make that the criteria, because if they prove that they're better and it isn't fair, then that means we'll have to kick them all out. So we just need to, no evidence need apply. Had a thought about pronouns. David Green on the Left, Right, and Center podcast was telling a little story this week about a college student who went to a sandwich shop with her dad. They ordered a couple sandwiches to go, and the sandwich shop employee handed them their sandwiches wrapped up. One of them marked his and one marked hers. And the employee said to the college student, I hope you got your pronouns right. And so they walked away with their sandwiches, but the dad is like, what the hell was that? Don't they know that you're a woman? And I think the point was the dad had never even heard of any sort of pronoun horseshit, that you might be a different pronoun than you would think. And this wasn't like an attack on the dad. I think David Green was just like, oh, how do you explain to someone who doesn't know about pronouns and inclusivity? And, like David Green, I think he's a Upper West Side New York Jew who's been hosting NPR shows for a decade. I think he was the host of Morning Edition for many years. Anyways, he's woke. So, he's woke, and he thinks that this new pronoun stuff is good. He probably thinks that it's good for diversity. He probably thinks it's equitable. I'm sure he thinks it's inclusive. But I think it's something else. That story, it made me think of a Far Side cartoon. If you're old enough, you'll remember the Far Side, greatest cartoon ever. So I'm going to read you that cartoon. So the picture is like a scientist in a white lab coat, just stereotypical. And on his head, he has like a weird apparatus hat / mechanical electronic device, sending radio waves out. And he's just walking down the street, and it's just a normal American, street with like houses and fences and stuff. And there's dogs. There's a dog in the street. There's a dog behind the fence in a yard. And so the cartoon at the bottom, the caption says, donning his new canine decoder, Professor Schwartzman becomes the first human being on Earth to hear what barking dogs are actually saying. And so, like I say, there's just these dogs on the street, various dogs. And so, for instance, the dog that is in the yard behind the fence is kind of looking at him, and that dog is saying, hey, 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 hey. And then there's a dog in the street that's kind of closer to him, looking at him, maybe a little menacingly. And that dog is saying, hey, hey, hey. And down the street, there's a dog chasing a car, and it's saying, hey, hey. And then in the background, there's a far off dog that's kind of looking at the moon or something, and it's going, hey. And so it's just like if you had some sort of pronoun talk decoder that you could put a helmet that you could put on your head. I think, if someone was like, oh, my pronouns are she, her, the decoder would be something like, whites are evil from the moment they're born and the doctor smacks them on the back so they take their first breath till the day they die. And if someone said something like, oh, I went to the store with they the other day, it would mean like, I hate all men. I think they're all evil. And that person and I know and me went to the store. Or maybe it's not those things. I mean, it depends on the person. And, probably each time they do it, they might be signaling a different thing that they hate. Basically, it's a way of signaling hatred. It's an us versus them thing. It's like, I'm part of this group and I hate that group. I'm part of this tribe. I hate that tribe. It's like how non-binary means you always vote Democrat. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that you're gonna do some muff diving. It means you're thinking about getting a short haircut. You're probably just gonna have sex with men like any normal woman ever would, and marry a man and have kids and do everything exactly like a straight woman, except you just want it to be clear you always vote Democrat. Therefore, you say you're non-binary. And well, so that's just another little theory of mine. I think elsewhere in this podcast, I have a segment about video games where a guy has a theory that pronouns in video games are because they want to say that transgender stuff and non-binary stuff is a scientific fact. That's what pronouns means. If you hear someone talking about pronouns, they're like, it's a scientific fact. Just like COVID came from a wet market, anyways, this one's a real science. This is the kind of scientific fact that's for reals. I don't know. I'm just going to keep an eye out on that. How many of these things are actually just signaling devices? They say they're all about something wonderful, but actually it's just signaling who you hate. Just tribalistic hatred. Well, let's take the other side of this a little bit. What does all this pronoun stuff mean? Maybe the woke people are right with what, they think it's just inclusivity. Or maybe I'm right. It's just a signal of tribalistic hatred. Maybe it's both. Neither. Maybe it's a third thing. I'm just going to keep an ear out for possible ideas. But my idea possibly has a flaw. I think you can tell by what I said and how I said it, that I'm not a fan of using pronouns to attack your political enemies. I'm not a fan of the people who use them to attack their political enemies. The idea of doing it that way, or the people who do it. You might say, those people are my political enemies, and I'm attacking them. What it all means is kind of dependent on base reality. Like there's the, real reality, and then there's the reality that we think exists. Like if there's an evil Christian patriarchy subjugating queers, every moment of the day all across America, without fail, then pronouns is just, trying to help out people who are in terrible jeopardy. It could be that and an attack on your political enemies. Or if that's not what's going on in base reality, in fact, this is the freest, most equal society that has ever existed, and queers are treated just fine, to the point that people are saying they're queer when they're not, because you actually get treated better than straight, then what I was saying is more likely the case. Now, to answer these questions, you kind of need, science. Possibly the science. I believe the data shows that we are a society that treats minorities very, very well. In fact, we treat them better than, majority. There's not a ton of good science on this. My understanding is there doesn't exist really any scientific proof that America's evil and racist and that woke people are right at all. Although just because proof doesn't exist doesn't mean you're not right. And then there's a small amount of science that exists that says I'm right. Basically, there's only a little bit of science that proves either side right, and it's just a little bit, and it proves that I am right. The thing that comes to mind was they did a survey, and they asked people stuff like, would you shop at a store owned by a Democrat, or would you shop at a store owned by a Republican? Would you date a Republican or a Democrat? And basically they asked Democrats, like, would you date a Republican? Or maybe it was Trump supporter or Trump voter. Like, would you date a Trump voter? And Democrats were like, no, I would not. Anyways, you can imagine, they were like, they wouldn't shop at a store owned by a Trump supporter. I mean, how would they know? Anyways, they just said they wouldn't. And Republicans, whatever, they were much less likely to say that they would not shop at a store that was owned by a Democrat. And I think the survey was done, right around the George Floyd time. It was at the height. And younger people were more likely to say that they wouldn't associate in the various ways with people of the opposite party than older people were to say. And I think there's more than just that one survey. That's the one that comes to mind. I don't know. I wish I had a thing where every time I saw one of those surveys, I wrote it down so I could go find it, because I've tried to go back and find them. I can find that one. I mean, it takes me like 10 minutes of Googling to find that shit. And I can't remember what the other one was. But in fact, a lot of that stuff is somewhere in my own podcast, but I'm not going to go back and listen to 800 episodes to find it. Like the fact that America's not racist is in the world something survey that they survey people all, in every country around the planet on racist questions. And America, I don't know, comes in tied for 7th or something least racist. Anyways, here's the galaxy brain thing. They got no proof that their view of the world is correct, so therefore they're just a bunch of bigoted, hateful people. And I got my little surveys that prove I'm just calling out hatred. I'm not an evil, hateful person myself. But here's the thing. Even though the data backs me up, that data is from the same kind of people who said that, COVID came from a wet market. I mean, basically, the data it's from the liars. Now, in my opinion, it's in the direction that they don't lie about. When they say it one way, that's the way that they would say. Anyways, that's the way they lie. They lie one direction. They always lie one direction and never lie the other direction. So you can trust it when they say the other one. But I don't know. Now I need some data to prove that part of what I'm saying is correct. Well, listener, how'd you like all that? That soliloquy, that extemporaneous verbal essay. Did it sound smart? Or maybe more, did it sound logically correct or logically coherent? I ask because I wondered, did it sound like the words that would come from a person who is good at prompt engineering? So let's just read from AI what that is. Prompt engineering is the process of crafting and refining input prompts to achieve desired outputs from AI models. It has 3 bullet points. It says, 1 is you got to design the input phrases. 2 is you've got to iteratively refine your phrases. And 3 is you got to understand the model's behavior. You got to know how your phrases are going to be interpreted by the model. How would you like to do prompt engineering as a job? Like maybe pronouns are justified if America is racist and misogynistic. But pronouns are not justified if America is racist or misogynistic. Anyways, so prompt engineering is asking questions of AI, trying to get the results that you want. And I was listening to the More or Less podcast, which is a Silicon Valley tech pod. And they had a guy on who is, I don't know, he works in Hollywood. And he's trying to create a company where actors act, I guess, in front of a camera, and then that is converted by AI into 2-dimensional cartoons. Think of old cartoons like Saturday morning cartoons or how Disney cartoons used to be before they're all 3D computer CGI crap. But, if you're making an AI cartoon, you can do prompt engineering, at a keyboard. You can be like, I don't know, a monkey. A monkey jumps up and down. Or you could have a person get in front of the camera and be like, ooh, 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 and put your arms, at your side, kind of like a monkey and jump up and down. But anyways, that's another form of prompt. It could be text. It could be video. Your prompt, it would be a form of prompt engineering, I guess is my point, to have an actor in front of a camera trying to get tell the AI how to make the AI movie. And that's kind of interesting. But what the guy said that was more interesting to me was that, like, the artists, making a movie is art. Doesn't seem like it sometimes. But, let's just call them artists, actors and writers and directors. This guy was saying that they don't like doing prompts, like text prompts. They don't like interacting with AI the way you have to interact with it right now. I mean, basically, it's just an input method. There used to just be keyboards. Then there was a mouse. Then there was touch screens. Then you could talk to it. Or, computers throughout the last decades. And then AI, they're trying to figure out different things. You can talk to it. You can film a video. Maybe, robots, you have to dress up in a robot suit and act out like the robot. But anyways, as things are right now, when you're using like text and words and verbal IQ, you know who's good at prompt engineering? It's going to be like, I'm sure Jews are the best. And then, white men, Asian men, Brahmins. And you know who's going to not be good at prompt engineering? Well, we'll just do it the legalese way. Not those people I mentioned. Everyone else. And so I don't know, if the prompt is acting in front of a camera, then that will be more inclusive. Or else we're going to be hearing a lot about inequalities and gaps. I've been doing my thing on Facebook where I go find a picture of some friends on their timeline, and then I upload it to a AI video generator, and it takes the image and turns it into a video. And the picture was a couple friends. They went to a place that has like, instead of darts, you throw a throwing axe at like a dartboard looking thing, which is interesting. But anyway, just a picture of them standing in front of these dartboards. And I said a monster comes up behind them, and that was the prompt that I gave it. And so that was the video. It's them, and instead of being a still image, they were smiling for the camera. They're smiling, but they're like alive and moving. And then a monster walks up behind them and kind of smiles over their shoulder. And that monster was the best special effects I've ever seen in my life. I wish I could show you a video. But anyways, just believe me, it was just a monster, and it looked better than any computer-generated or makeup monster that has ever been in a movie. And then I realized, beyond that, there was more special effects that were the best I've ever seen in my life. And that is the two women, my friends. Because it was a still image, and now they're moving and smiling. It looked exactly real. There was nothing special about it. It was just like you had took out your phone and filmed someone smiling, and they moved a little bit. They didn't move a lot. They didn't do much. They were just kind of there in a video smiling. And anyways, it looked 100% real. You never would have guessed. And I tried to make another video, which was a cat sitting on a balloon floating behind them. And then that one was all messed up and didn't look real at all. So it just depends. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, this is like I don't know, like I always say, like cheap Chinese tools. This is just a cheap Chinese AI, Kling, K-L-I-N-G, if you want to try it. I mean, I don't know. I had AI. I was like, give me the 10 movies that have the best special effects ever. And I just, I've seen all of them. And I went down that list, and I'm like, none of those movies have better, more realistic looking special effects. Like Alien or Aliens, like those look pretty good. It wasn't on the list, but like the opening scene from Star Wars is a spaceship that flies over the camera. And in real life, it was a giant model. Like that looks as good as this thing that I made, but it doesn't look better. Anyways, we're just in a crazy time where special effects, I mean, it's just better than any special effects ever. It just looks real. You can have a person that looks exactly like a real person, and you can have a monster that looks exactly like a real monster existed. Well, all this stuff made me want to create a timeline for how fast AI video is getting better, so I can try and figure out when it's going to put all the woke people in Hollywood out of a job. And so I went and found one of my AI video YouTubers. I can't remember which one. There's a bunch of YouTubers who just do AI video news. They're like, oh, this Chinese AI video generator just came online, and let me show you. I tried it out, and this is how it looked. I mean, they're a YouTuber. They need to come up with some video every day, so they just tell you what's going on each day. So I went and looked at the same guy. I looked at what he was talking about 3 months ago, what he was talking about 6 months ago, what he was talking about 9 months ago. And so I didn't even go to 12 months. Anyways, 9 months ago, we didn't have video generation. It was image generation. So there you go. 9 months ago, we didn't even have video. And then 6 months ago, there was a kind of video, but what it looked like was a bunch of still images stitched together trying to be a video. Like a standard movie theater movie is 24 frames a second. So, it would be like 24 AI generated images, all kind of similar, all in a row, hitting you, per second. But you could just still see it was just images that were not all the same. It wasn't a cohesive video. And like people's faces were still kind of melting and they'd have too many fingers on their hands. And so that's 6 months ago. And then 3 months ago, this thing called Runway Gen 3 had just come out. And that one makes videos that they look pretty darn real. You're starting to look like a movie. But it was only for people who, had a paid subscription and you could only get a few seconds at a time. And so that was 3 months ago. And then today, like I said, you can go on the internet for free and create, a 5-second video that has the best special effects that have ever existed in the history of movie making. So there you go. In 9 months, we've gone from no video at all to the best looking video and special effects you've ever seen. But now what we still don't have, you still can't actually make a movie. What I'm waiting for, what I'm looking for is a walk and talk. When I see it, I will tell you, but it's a famous thing from the West Wing TV show, which was set in the White House. And the show was always revolving around, the president and the chief of staff and the whatever, and the assistant deputy chief of staff. They'd be like walking down the hallway, rapid fire discussions as they deal with the war in Afghanistan or whatever. And they just would call it a walk and talk. I don't know, just that show. Instead of people sitting down and talking, they always walked and talked. And so I'm waiting for an AI video where you can say, I want a man who looks like this. I want a woman who looks like that. I want him to walk down a hallway that looks like this. And I want him to walk and talk and say these things. And, pause and, take a drag of their cigarette and then say the next line or whatever. We don't have that yet. I think that's probably 3 months from now. And then you can make a movie. Something else they mentioned on that More or Less podcast was Architectural Digest has a YouTube channel. That's a magazine, or it was. And they have a video recently interviewing, I think it's the production designer for the movie Wicked. And he goes over the effects in that movie. It's all real. It's amazing. CGI is computer generated imagery. CGI is computer effects. Practical effects is what's, when it's really there. Makeup would be called practical effects, but, anything, you got cars jumping or something that, if it's really a car there jumping, then that's a practical effect. And for this movie Wicked, I think they may have built the most fancy, giant, amazing sets and stuff that maybe ever built. I think in the 50s, they had these, the cast of thousands where they had sword and sandals, Roman movies where there'd be a scene of an army and, every one of those people would have to be real before they had CGI. But Wicked, I don't know, one scene is, there's a magic school. I guess the story is about two girls going to a magic school. And so as you head to the magic school, you go through these fields of tulips. So they planted 9 million tulips in a field. So it's all real. Every tulip you see there is real. And the school is like a castle. And I think maybe they made the first 4 floors. They really made that part of the castle. And then, I don't know what, the next 10 stories are CGI. But, most of the filming, all you need to see is the first 4 floors. And instead of a road leading into a giant courtyard, it's a river. So they create kind of like a swimming pool, but like a river, with concrete. It's pretty amazing. And they get to amortize it over 2 movies, so maybe that's why they could afford all this. and they got a story. They like the 9 million tulips, after they used them in the fields, they like picked them all and then like used them for something else, or they had a whole bunch of flowers. You get the idea. And I don't know how AI is going to compare to that, but you don't see that kind of stuff much in movies anymore. There was a story in the news about how women dressing up as the Wicked Witch were going to the theater, and the management at the theater was making them go to the bathroom and wash off the green face paint. And apparently the AMC movie theater chain just has a rule about not wearing stuff that obscures your identity. But when I first heard about it, I thought, was it like blackface? Because they race swapped the green Wicked Witch, right? And it's now played by a black actress. And so I was wondering if like white women moviegoers can't paint their face green because that's kind of a new blackface. Tesla released a new video of their robot catching a ball. Like a person tossed a tennis ball to the robot. You know, they tossed it like you would toss it to a little kid who's not very good at catching. But still, the robot moved its hand fast enough to go grab the tennis ball, and I think the video had it catch the ball, I don't know, several times in a row. So we've been watching the Tesla robot get faster. Like, it's very slow. Like, it walks real slow. And anyways, having it move its hand fast enough to catch a ball is by far the fastest thing we've seen it ever do. And I was watching a couple of guys talk about AI, and they were like, well, America's better than China at AI, but China's better than America at robots. And so, I don't know. I haven't seen anyone, American or Chinese, have a robot that can catch a ball. So Tesla may be pulling ahead. I mean, maybe. If you like this podcast, please tell a friend. If you have the Spotify app, you can leave a comment. You can be like Shayna Marchetti, who on Sunday afternoon said, "Hi, I'm nervous about Elon's enthusiasm of having robots all over town that not who look just like us, who express desire to be more like us. Brr. Brr emoji." And I replied, the robots will replace humans in all the sports ball games. So I was just about to publish this podcast episode, and then Shayna got in with her comment right under the wire. It sounds like she's listening to my weekly podcast 6 days and 23 hours after I publish it. So let that be a lesson to the rest of you listeners. My podcast ages like a fine wine. Or anything else that gets better with age, like milk. Last week, I believe it was Chopper22 who left a comment who was like, I haven't even listened to your podcast, but I'm sure it's going to be great. So you can wait a week to listen to it, or if you don't listen to it at all, that makes it even better. So, dear listeners, go live your life to the fullest. You can listen when you're dead. I'm just messing with you guys, Shayna and Chopper. Thanks for listening. Love you guys. A friend of mine slid into my Facebook DMs and left a comment on the last episode. And he said, I don't know if you know this, but in the movie Wicked, they race-swapped both of the witches. The Wicked Witch was swapped with the black lady, and the White Witch was swapped with a Mexican. Her name is Ariana Grande. She's a famous pop star. Thanks for the comment, buddy. The White Witch? I think it's actually the Good Witch. They're all white witches normally. Well, I mean, is a green witch white? I think so. I mean, like Homer Simpson. Is he white? He's yellow, but I think he's white. I don't know. Have the Simpsons been Hispanic the whole time or Asian? But anyways, Carl is Homer's black friend. So we know if you're black, you're not yellow. But yeah, Ariana Grande plays, I guess, Glenda, the Good Witch. She's a smoking hot actress, pop star, formerly Disney Channel jailbait, to put it one way. I wonder about those Disney Channel starlets. Selena Gomez, the black one, Zendaya. Like the Disney Channel TV show producer is looking at possible actresses for a role, and he's like, let's choose her. Men are going to want to fuck her in, checks her age, 5 years. Like, is it coincidence that they all turn into sex pots when they're 18? Or what excuse would those Disney Channel people give? But anyways, is Ariana Grande Hispanic? I looked it up. She's Italian. I mean, I think she says she has some Sicilian in her. Would you like some? So, your white mileage may vary. YWMMV. I was trying to think if there was a N-word for Italians, like sand N-words. That'd be like pasta N-words? Is that what Ariana Grande is? On Tuesday, the Financial Times' Unhedged podcast is talking about tariffs and are they really inflationary? You probably heard Trump is talking tariffs. People are like, Trump, tariffs are Nazis. Trump is a Hitler, tariffs are Nazis, or something. Inflation is the Jews. Black Friday discounts are the hot girl Jews. Getting a free turkey when you buy a ham is the handsome young blonde Nazi who might have a heart of gold. The hills are alive with the sound of microaggressions echoing through DEI training sessions. Tariffs are a tax on goods coming into the country. For instance, Trump recently threatened to do a cross-the-board tariffs on Canada and Mexico, 25%. So if Mexico was going to send $100 of stuff into America, well, the government would add a $25 tax on top of that, and the importer would pay. So Walmart, maybe. Yeah, so avocados. $100 of Mexican avocados go from Mexico to Walmart. Walmart has to pay $125, 25 to the government, and 100 to Mexico. And then if they raise the price at the store 25%, then maybe that's inflation. But maybe not. So this podcast mentions something I never heard of. It's called a price level shift. And so if prices go up one time only, that's a price level shift. That's not inflation. So, if this proverbial $100 of avocados, if it goes up $1 a month and goes up $12 a year, then that would be 12% inflation. So to do the math wrong, to keep it simple, if you got a 12% inflation on your avocados, well, after a year, they'd be $112, then they'd be $124, then they'd be $136 after 3 years. So, now you're getting more than the $125 from a tariff. So if you got a one-time price level shift or inflation, you're still paying more, but it's kind of like the price level shift might be worse right now, but in the long run, inflation sounds worse. Or that's probably not right. Anyways, they're just different things. I'm just thinking out loud, but I guess if Trump did a 25% tariff on Mexican avocados, and so boom, the first year they would go up $25. They'd be $125. You'd be like, wow, that's like 25% inflation. But the next year they wouldn't go up anymore, right? They'd still be 125. So then it'd be like having zero inflation ever after. Well, so like I said, this is for goods being imported into America. Apparently you can do tariffs on stuff going out of America. We just don't do that, but that would be a tariff also. But America has a closed economy. So for instance, China has 33% of their stuff going in and out of the country. Europe has 30% of their stuff going in and out of Europe. And America has only 19% of stuff going in and out of the country. And I'd imagine a lot of that is energy. Like we get oil out of the ground in America, and then we make our cars in America, and then we put the gas into our cars, all in America, and nothing leaves on any of that process. And China has more oil than you think. I heard a thing about that once, but anyways, they still import a lot of oil in China. But I think if you got a closed economy, tariffs are not that big of a deal because you're making the price of the stuff coming into the country go up. Oh, barely any stuff comes in, comparatively. They tell a funny story about one of the Trump 1.0 tariffs. Trump's tariffs, TT, sometimes called a titty. Trump is the chairman of the Itty Bitty Titty Committee. In 2018, Trump imposed a tariff on washing machines. And the economists are like, we got you now, you little Nazi oinker. We got you by your little screw, curly tail. Curly screw? Curly whirly? Girly whirly? Corkscrew. So Trump put tariffs on washing machines in 2018. The price of washing machines went up. And then, for no reason, the price of washing machines went down in 2019. And then they went back up in 2020 in the pandemic, and you haven't proved nothing. All right, it gets more interesting. So washing machines are what everyone looks at because Trump did it to washing machines, but not to other household appliances. And so they're like, in 2018, washing machines went up and other household appliances didn't go up. Aha, you've raised prices on the American public, Trump, you little oinker. And Trump said, what about 2019 when prices went back down? And economists are like, screw you. I'm going to have my mom call your mom and get you in trouble. But anyways, it's almost like that's their best example. Prices went up for 1 year before they went down 1 year. And they're like, I don't know, they don't have anything better. I mean, this is at least, people that the mainstream media quotes as experts, right? That's who we're supposedly listening to. Does that sound like the same kind of people who lied about COVID and Hunter Biden's laptop and, start your long list? Yes, it does sound like those same people. But so at the same time, Trump did a bunch of other tariffs. Maybe not always on household appliances, but a bunch of other stuff. And so economists did studies looking at all of it. So basically, stuff came into the country, the government imposed their tariff, the government took the money. Economists are like, see, we told you, they took the money. They took the money, it's terrible. But then when you look at consumer prices, they didn't go up. The consumer didn't pay for it. Let's listen to the Financial Times describe it.
What's really interesting that in the majority of cases, it then didn't appear obviously to get passed on to consumers. So washing machines is here the exception. So, and the way that economists try and work this out is they can see that importers are paying more. So it's a tax on imports, with one exception, sort of commodity intermediate goods. So things that go into the production of other goods. So steel, their exporters did pay because you can just get steel from pretty much anywhere. And so if you want to stay competitive, you have to lower your price. But that steel is, again, another exception. So the majority of goods, the importer paid, but it didn't obviously get transmitted to consumers. Now, people don't know whether that meant that the importers themselves absorbed the additional costs in their margins or passed it on to their own workers in lower pay than they would otherwise get, or they tried to get ahead of the tariffs, imported all this stuff just before the tariffs came in so it didn't really affect them too much, or they did smart things saying, well, actually, America's not that competitive an economy. We can raise all our prices by a little bit, and so things that haven't got tariffs on will raise those prices as well. So you can't actually easily see it, and so it's sort of confounding the tools that economists use to try and work out whether it had an effect.
Basically, the evidence is saying, actually, it's not foreign countries that pay, it is American companies, one way or another.
So it's America one way or another, because American companies are mostly owned by Americans. So
right.
In some form or other, America pays.
So I think we're starting to get to the answer. You can hear how desperate they are to say that tariffs hurt Americans, Americans pay. Some American pays, therefore, Trump's a Nazi, vote for Kamala. Go to the Capitol on January 6, 2025, and attack. We need to make Kamala the president and stop these tariffs. But so, Americans pay, it's not the consumer. What does that leave? That leaves the rich. The top 1% owns more than half of all the companies, or more than half the value of all the companies in America. And let me tell you, the richer you are, the more you're against tariffs. So I didn't know. I mean, you won't learn nothing out of the mainstream media, but basically, tariffs are a thing that is not bad for the working class and is hated by the ultra-rich, all the Democrat donors. Of the 100 largest companies in America, the CEOs, 90 of them supported Kamala Harris, 0 of them supported Trump. I mean, if that doesn't tell you who's evil, then you got Trump derangement syndrome. 90 out of 100 CEOs are not trying to help the working class, but they are trying to fuck them. Well, the Financial Times is a globalist, neoliberal news outlet. They basically support the free flow of goods, capital, and people across borders all around the world as much as possible, maxed out. And they hate tariffs. So I guess we can say if you're a person who benefits from the free flow of people, goods, and capital all around the world across borders with no respect for, country boundaries, then tariffs are bad for you. And then they're like, so basically we don't know where the money went. Trump did his titties. The money was paid to the government. The consumers didn't pay. Someone had to pay. Money doesn't just appear out of nowhere. And so maybe it came out of the workers' salaries. I mean, I don't know. Basically, they say that. They don't go any further than that. They're like, maybe it came away from workers. Maybe it came from the working class. There you go. They're like, tariffs are terrible. Didn't seem to hurt consumers. Maybe it came from the working class. They're like, I don't know who paid. Maybe the working class. They would like it to be the working class. That would turn them from evil people into good people, basically. And economists either don't know or they don't want to know what it does to the working class. Maybe it doesn't hurt them. Maybe it only hurts the billionaires. And it's funny, like college professors, they're all liars. And most of them are woke liars who will be like, oh yeah, man can get pregnant and women can have large penises and America's racist and, all sorts of lies, woke lies. But the economics PhD professors are different. From their mouths come a bunch of lies that end up screwing the working class and helping the rich. I mean, basically, like, if you're a working class white man, then the left-wing professors are going to do lies to hurt you, and the kind of like right-wing economist professors are going to do lies to hurt you. They're all going to hurt you. They all hate you. So based on that, you got to say that researchers tried to prove that tariffs are bad for the average American, and they couldn't do it. Like, they got out 100 pieces of blank paper, and on the last page, they said, tariffs hurt the average American. And then they went and did a bunch of research to try and fill in the 99 pages before that, but they couldn't do it, and they just gave up. So, I mean, it doesn't prove anything conclusively either way, but it looks like that's the state we're in with tariffs. Well, and actually, the very last thing the guy says to conclude the podcast is, oh yeah, and America's a relatively closed economy and tariffs don't make a big difference anyways. Well, okay, that's a bunch of who knows what. Let's summarize here. Dear Donald Trump, please do your tariffs. Drop the hammer. Sincerely, anti-woke podcast host. Felix on the Slate Money podcast was talking about tariffs, so I grabbed a clip, a little more information. I'm kind of doing the math wrong.
I wrote it down, but do I need to tell you? We get a lot of our fruits and vegetables from Mexico, car parts. Prices would go up a crazy amount. There's no...
Yeah, I think 77% of our fruits and vegetables that are imported come from Mexico.
Yeah,
Right.
Wither the avocado, right? People will freak out.
So I have two ideas that are going in opposite directions here. One is that there is this kind of intuition that if you place a 25% tariff on Mexican avocados, then the price of Mexican avocados is going to go up by 25%. And that's just not true. That's not how consumer prices work. You don't have to maintain your percentage margins the whole way through the chain. So depending on the amount of money that you actually paid for that avocado in Mexico, is going to be maybe, I don't know, a third or less than half of the price of the avocado that you are paying in your grocery store, right?
And I didn't put it into the clip, but a place where 25% tariffs on everything from Mexico and Canada, which is what Trump has said, where that would be devastating is, I guess, when you're building a car, parts are being made in all three countries. North America is like one thing when it comes to building cars. And sometimes there's even car parts, I don't know, maybe a part will be made in America, it'll be shipped to Mexico, added to a larger part of the car, which will be shipped back to America and combined into something even bigger anyways, and then back and forth. So car parts will go back and forth and be combined into larger parts between America, Canada, and Mexico. And if you were to do a 25% tariff, every time the thing went back and forth, it would end up getting way more than 25% on it. And so Felix thinks that Trump is not going to do any sort of tariff that would mess up car manufacturing like that. Well, and to get all the economics out, so I I mean, it's not crazy. I chose avocados as my example before I listened to them, and they chose avocados. But anyway, that's just a famous vegetable from Mexico. But basically, if you buy $100 of avocados at Walmart, that doesn't mean that it was $100 of avocados in Mexico, right? They start cheap. Like in particular, I don't know, like we'll switch to coffee now. But, I think, in Colombia or something, the farmer gets like 10 cents a pound for coffee. And then by the time it gets to Starbucks, you're paying $50 a pound. So if you do the tariff at the beginning, like that 10 cents a pound coffee would now be 12.5 cents. So by the time it gets to you for $50 a pound at Starbucks, whatever, that's 2.5 cents. You wouldn't notice the difference. To unfortunately switch from avocados to coffee and from Mexico to Colombia and fuck it all up. But basically, it depends on the product. Now, like for instance, with oil, which maybe we buy from Canada, there's no markup. So if you buy $100 of oil from Canada, in America, that's just, it's $101. So if you add a 25% tariff to that, it would just basically make the price go up exactly 25%. I mean, and basically don't worry about any of this crap. Maybe this is just for me, but so oil is a commodity. So that's how it works with commodities. And whoever I was listening to previously was talking about tariffs. They mentioned that Chinese steel is a commodity. And so when you put tariffs on Chinese stuff, in particular Chinese steel or Chinese commodities, then what happens there is you would think, oh, well, then it makes up the price in America go up. Actually, that's not what happens. What happens there is now you go to other countries. Maybe you're buying, German steel or Mexican steel when you put a tariff on China. And it doesn't make it any more expensive in America, but it just hurts the Chinese. All right, that's enough. That's enough of that shit. Anti-woke video game YouTubers are looking for the next Dragon Age the Veilguard. Like, they need a woke game to talk about. And Dragon Age the Veilguard, it's the one I mentioned. It has, your character can have double mastectomy scars to represent top surgery. And it's got pronouns, they, them. It's like part of the story is about learning about pronouns. And there's a new game coming out called Avowed that has pronouns in it. And so far, they've let a few gamers play it, I think YouTube gamers, but they're only allowed to show certain parts from the game, and they can't show any part of the character creation part. That's the beginning of the game. Like in Dragon Age, that's the part where you give your character double mastectomy scars. It seems like in video games, the wokest stuff happens right there at the beginning when you create your character. You see what kind of woke, weird options they give you. So we haven't seen the full character creation thing is. Hopefully it's amazing. I'll tell you about it if it is. I want an option for your character where you can check dick chopped off. You'll see why in a second. But it seems like there's a ton of woke video games, and no one has time for every woke one. But Grums, who's a famous anti-woke video game Twitter guy, he posted about how Avowed has pronouns in it, and Elon Musk replied saying no fantasy game should ever have pronouns. So if Elon Musk replies, then that's a game that we take note of. So that's why you're hearing about it. So Avowed is from Obsidian Video Game Studio, or Obsidian Studios or something, which is a mildly famous studio that made Fallout New Vegas, which is now a TV show on Amazon. Fallout, you probably heard of it. Well, probably not, but you might have heard of it. Anyways, Obsidian is a game company that made games that people loved, and they loved them so much they got their own TV show, right? That's kind of the criteria for people like me and you if you don't play games. How big a game is it? It got a TV show. So anyways, they used to make games, they got TV shows, and now they're making woke games. Probably going woke and getting broke. Well, that's enough for this clip. So Andy Pants Gaming is like a Christian gamer that I watch on YouTube. Let's hear what he has to say. Well, and I recorded this clip on my phone watching YouTube, and on your phone you can't have an ad blocker. And so after I recorded the little part of Andy Pants, an advertisement came on for Dune Prophecy. That's like the new Space Witch TV show. Possibly lesbian space witches. So I just left that in.
Here's an Instagram post from Obsidian. They've got all these satanic symbols in here. They've got the LGBTQ symbols. Join us in 2 hours as Obsidian's Rainbow Dice Society roll dice and raise money for the LGBTQ Center, Orange County, celebrating depravity, reveling in their evil, disgusting lifestyles. This was really the cherry on top for me of being disgusting. So if you're familiar with this game Grounded that Obsidian made, not only is this game primarily aimed at children, but the game is educating. Grounded and Obsidian are trying to educate children about trans stuff, about chopping their dicks off, about being asexual, about being lesbian, being gay. God.
We must act.
Well, there you go. Does that give you a hankering for some space witches? But Andy Pants gave a rationale for why he doesn't like pronouns in his games. And he says it's because pronouns are just like an LGBTQ religion. And he's a Christian. He has faith in God. But he doesn't think video games should, have things in them that are like, we've scientifically proved it. God is real. He has faith, but he's not trying to shove it down atheists' throats in their video games. And that rationale is a little pat, considering he also thinks that being a lesbian is an abomination before God. How'd you like that last sentence? Was it punchy? You think I just make this stuff up off the top of my head. I had to go to AI. AI wrote the abomination before God part. I was trying to think what a Christian might say about being gay. So I asked ChatGPT, and it came back with a bunch of woke horse shit. So I said to it, take your woke feelings and now write me 10 things that Christians would say that would be the most offensive possible to someone who believed all that woke horse shit you were talking about. Here's a few of its ideas. Well, 1, an abomination before God. 2, a perversion of nature. 6, a choice, not an identity. 7, a path to eternal damnation. 9, living in sin, not love. I don't know. Those are decent punchlines to punch up your podcast, make it more punchy. So Obsidian, this formerly great video game studio, is owned by Xbox, which is owned by Microsoft, which is owned by Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and Fidelity. I always forget Fidelity. That's the 4th big index fund. So everyone's retirement money goes straight to the top of the index funds and then goes blop, blop, blop down the corporate ownership ladder and ends up as a big plop in pronouns of a video game. And if this is a video, I'd show you the picture of the Obsidian crew that helped make the game. Andy Pants puts it on the screen, and it's just a bunch of fat white lesbians or whatever that is when women have those kind of weird short haircuts. Back in the day, almost before my day, short spiky haircuts would be on young, fit, attractive women, and they'd be punk rockers. But now they're on 30-something fat white, pick your queer flavor. I don't know. I don't think the companies can be reformed. They just go out of business and are replaced possibly by something that's not woke, or who knows. A ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel started this week. Hezbollah hangs out on the northern border of Israel and shoots rockets south. And when Israel went into Gaza, Hezbollah said, we're going to shoot rockets until you leave. But Israel's been killing the leaders of Hezbollah and bombing them in general, and it looks like they're going to agree to a ceasefire, even though Israel has not left Gaza. And it's not known for sure, but it kind of looks like Israel's getting ready to leave Gaza anyways, or to wind that down or something, but they don't want to do it in a way that makes it look like Hezbollah forced them to do it. So, Israel has to get Hezbollah to back down before they can leave Gaza. It can't be making Israel look weak. And so that's the news. You can find out more from other sources. I think the thing that isn't always mentioned enough is that Israel flattened Hezbollah this time. Israel got in a war with Hezbollah in 2006, And I don't know, I'm sure they bombed them a little bit. But this time it sounds like Israel, they flattened Hezbollah and their cousins and their neighbors and their neighbors' cousins. Basically the same thing they did to Gaza. This is the new plan. If a terrorist organization just mixes themselves in with a bunch of civilians and then shoots rockets at Israel, well, Israel's finally fed up with it, and they're just flattening every building. And, there's different theories on all this stuff. Like one theory I hear from Robert Wright and others is, Israel should stop bombing Gaza because every terrorist you kill creates 5 more terrorists, 'cause when their kids grow up and their cousins are mad that their cousin got killed and etc. It's like a hydra, so stop chopping off the heads. And I think a lot of people say that because they're like, they want Israel to stop bombing Gaza, and then they want a rationale that sounds like they're on the side of Israel. And who knows, maybe they're right. It just seems like, depending on the year and the war, sometimes you do less bombing, sometimes you do more bombing. It never really, I don't know, they never really quite get the result they want. This time they're trying extra bombing, extra destruction of buildings in particular. But the thing I'm watching, although not that carefully, is there's an organization called the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, PCPSR. And they ask Palestinians stuff like, do you think Hamas should be in charge of Palestinians? And do you think that October 7th was a good idea, going in there and attacking the Jews? And, you'll get some high numbers. Like, I think people in Gaza right after October 7th, they all agreed that was the exact right thing to do. Go get them. But now that it's been more than a year, I noticed that the more bombed people have been, the less they support stuff like Hamas and October 7th. I don't have the numbers, but maybe, like people in Gaza went from 85% support October 7th to 50% support it now or something. Maybe 90-40. I don't know. But so I just think flattening all the buildings is somewhat effective by that metric. And, Palestinians supporting Hamas, when they stop supporting Hamas, maybe then, they won't, be like the hydra that comes back with more heads and attacks Israel. And, there's more than one kind of Palestinian. They've surveyed Palestinians in the West Bank, which has not been flattened. And for instance, they really love Hamas and really think October 7th was great. So, if your buildings aren't flattened, you still think it was a great idea. And then Lebanon and Hezbollah, I'm not going to go into it too much, but anyways, not everyone there wants their buildings flattened either. And Israel's trying to create a no-go zone in the southern part of Lebanon. But the ceasefire got announced, and a bunch of Lebanese people who had fled, they went back south to see their houses and to find them flattened. And NPR sent someone there and was interviewing people, and the guy was saying, oh yeah, in 2006, my house got flattened, and a Hezbollah guy showed up with a clipboard and wrote me a check to build me a new house. But back then, it was just some of the buildings, not all of them. And Israel didn't kill all the people at the top, and well, you can see, if you don't get a big fat check, you might not be so happy. Oh, and then the other theory going around is that obviously Trump is coming, and Israel's waiting for Trump to get into office so they can drop the hammer on Iran. Maybe. We'll have to wait and see on that. Russia-Ukraine war, Russia is still winning. Zelensky was talking about how maybe he would let Russia keep some of the land that they currently have, which is a new thing for him to say. And he said he would be okay with that if NATO agrees to protect the non-Russian part of Ukraine after the agreement, which I think Putin is not going to go for. While you're winning, you don't settle. So anyways, but it was new for Zelensky to say that. If I was a Ukrainian who got rich on this war, or, this war made me even richer, or I'm rich. Anyways, if I'm rich somehow with this war, I would be looking for a way to lock this in when the war is over. So just keep an eye on people trying to lock in their wealth and not let their enemies get in power and then have them all killed. It goes for Zelensky and for Putin. Like if there's a big change in power of either of those countries, very likely the new people kill them. You know, you don't want the old leaders hanging around. You kill them. And I was listening to the Russians with Attitude podcast, and they had a theory I hadn't heard about why America wanted Russia to attack Ukraine. I mean, my understanding is America thought we would just crush Russia totally and instantly without firing a bullet with sanctions, but then that didn't work out. But these guys think that it's, I don't know, people in the State Department or whatever, anyways, pushing gay rights. Like Russia is known for being not friendly to gay stuff. And so maybe, you know, you want to get a war going as an excuse to crush a country to make them more gay friendly. I forget how they said that. I think they're like, Russia doesn't allow pride parades, and the West is like, that's not going to fly. Well, that's the end of the episode. Links in the description, and thanks for listening.